Hello and welcome to this session on client side versus server side. So first try to understand what a client side means. By client side what we mean is any program which runs on the client's device and it also requests some data from a server. Now what are the most common types of client side programs? It can be browser clients which we use every day to access any website. Or it can be desktop clients like Microsoft Teams, which we use, or maybe WhatsApp for desktop version. Or it can also be mobile clients, like many of our Android and iOS apps, which we use daily to access different kinds of services. So all these are examples of client-side programs which basically run on the client's device and which request some data from the server, which is situated somewhere in the cloud. Not necessarily the server needs to be on the cloud or the client needs to be only this kind of devices. Even you can have a client as another program and server as a different program, both running on your same machine. So that can also be a combination or a pair of client and server side. We will see a very short demo of that towards the end of this video. Let's see what are the server side programs. Server side programs are those which run basically on the server, maybe on the cloud, or maybe even in the local network, or maybe even locally. But the main purpose of the server-side program is to serve some kind of data which is requested by the client, and the server-side program runs continuously like in an infinite while loop. Basically waits for multiple clients to request for some data and it responds back to clients. The examples of server-side programs, very popular examples of server-side programs, can be database server, or web servers, or application servers. So if you think of the database servers, then basically the client for the database server are the application servers which host the dynamic sites and fetch the data from the databases. And apart from that, server-side programs can also be some batch programs which run typically during the night for some reconciliation jobs, but they might not necessarily have any client. Okay, so let's see what are the different kinds of protocols. By protocols, what we mean is the different standards via which the clients and the server can communicate with each other. The most common protocol, as we all know, is definitely the HTTP or the HTTPS protocol, via which we access all the websites. Then comes the WebSocket protocol. So WebSocket protocol basically sits on top of HTTP protocol, and the difference with HTTP protocol is that WebSocket protocol is always a two-sided communication. It's typically used for a chat program. Then there is also a gRPC protocol which is also similar to HTTP, but it's much faster and much leaner. Often a machine-to-machine connectivity is achieved using gRPC protocol. Then there are also other protocols like FTP protocol, which is basically file transfer protocol, and then SMTP protocol, which is basically for SMTP or POP3 protocol used by the email clients like your Outlook or the Gmail clients for fetching the mails from the server. Apart from that, there can also be some TCP and UDP protocols, which are basically the lowest level protocols, and we can also write server programs which listen to only TCP or UDP protocols. What is secure socket layer? So normally in production and in actual real world scenario, client and the server needs to share the data, needs to communicate, because they need to exchange data in a very secure way. Otherwise, hackers can actually snoop in and can read the data. In order to prevent that, we have the concept of secure socket layer. And a very good example, a very easy example of secure socket layer is our websites. Like most of our websites that we see nowadays are HTTPS instead of HTTP. So HTTPS is basically the SSL version of the HTTP protocol. You can actually see whether a site is HTTPS or not by seeing that padlock or that lock icon on the browser. And you can also, by the way, click on that and see whether that connection is secure or not. So apart from HTTP, also many other protocols have their SSL version. And it is important to understand that in today's world, normally we do the development in a non-SSL protocol because that's much easier. But while in production, the client and the server normally exchanges data over SSL protocol. Here are some of the dedicated ports. Like all the protocols normally communicate over some dedicated ports. Now we can change those designated ports, but the advantage of using dedicated ports is that we can actually identify what protocol is being used by seeing the port number being used. So HTTP or HTTPS typically are consumed over 80 and 443 ports respectively, FTP on 21, and the others are also listed below. Again, you can change the default ports, but it is better to stick to them for maintaining the standard. Now is our demo time. We will see a short demo of a client server which you can run in your own machine, and for that I have written a very small Java-based TCP server which will run and will be able to respond to the client request. The important thing to understand is the client and the server need not be always separated out. They can also be on the same machine. Like here we will see the client and the server running on the same machine, but in production deployment the server can be actually put in one cloud and the client can be in a different cloud. The client can be installed on a desktop or can be also installed on a mobile device. It's a very simple server program. It's a TCP server written in plain simple Java. You can just right click and run it. It does not need any other external Java library. So I can just run this TCP server. The purpose of the server program is to receive a client's sentence and then do a word count. So it's basically a word counter program. So if you send a line to the server program, it receives that line and responds back with the number of words in that line. So it's nothing fancy, just to demonstrate the client-server communication. So the server is up and running. Now I will open another terminal and send a request to the server. So what I'm sending is, I'm just sending this string. This is a Java server, and then I'm using a pipe, and then nc localhost, then the port where the server is running. So if I send this, this is basically a client, a very small client. It's a command line utility client. So then the server is responding back with the total words. And you can also see that the server had received the request, and it had received this request, and it has responded back to the client. Thank you for attending. I hope it was useful, and I would suggest you to actually try running the Java server and the client. The full program is there in my blog, which is mentioned below. And please feel free to provide any feedback either in the blog or in this channel. And last but not the least, if you really like my video, kindly subscribe to my channel. That would motivate me.